Welcome everyone to another edition of Drunk Agile. With us, as always, just jumping out of her skin. There's Nisha there in the background. So excited to be here. She looks like that because in front of her is, as always,
Prateek Singh.
And my name is Daniel Bacanti. Thank you for joining us. Prateek, what are you drinking tonight? Something exciting, I think.
Yeah, it is. It's a sherry cask, Glen Grant, Glenlivet, 13-year-old and 61%, and just it's almost a dessert. It's beautiful sherry whiskey. So, yeah.
Here on Drunk Agile, we love to play the game, which is higher, Prateek's IQ or the age of the whiskey that he's drinking. So
winning whiskey.
whiskey is winning. I finally just killed this Glengarry bottle. The hand-filled cask. I told you it was 61.6%. I hate to say it. I don't know if I hate to say it, but maybe I do. This one tastes a little bit more like a bourbon than a proper whiskey. Yes, I did say that bourbon's not proper whiskey.
It is.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
I think also tonight we should, I don't know if we've ever debuted our new slogan for Drunk Agile. Have we? I don't think we've debuted that on the show yet. Do you remember our new slogan? You don't even remember our new slogan, do you?
I don't remember because I think I was drunk that day.
Yeah.
But I do remember us talking about a new slogan.
So the new slogan for Drunk Agile is start, starting, stop, stopping.
Stop, stopping. Yeah, start, starting, stop, stopping.
Yeah, I do.
And that's
I had to get that
mostly
right.
That is mostly for the drunk part, not for the agile part.
Exactly. Prateek, would you like to introduce the topic for tonight, please?
Yeah, so tonight we're actually responding to a viewer comment.
Thank you for the viewer comment, by the way.
Yeah, we received the comment that said that in this person's forays into Agile, they have been told very often that Kanban is for mature teams, for Agile mature teams, and not for people to start with. So we're trying to see if we can dispel that myth.
It is hilarious to me because if you're talking to a team that's been doing Scrum for a while, the argument that I always hear is Scrum is for complex product work and Kanban is for very, very simple work.
Yeah.
But if you haven't done any Agile method before and you're trying to decide, do we do Scrum or do we do Kanban, then everybody will tell you, oh, well, you have to be really, really super mature to do Kanban. And it's like, it can't be both ways. For whatever reason, I don't know, Kanban seems to be the punching bag of the Agile community. Why do you think that is, Prateek? Or do you have something else to say? I don't know. I mean,
no. I think it is that way because there are probably more people who are experts in practicing and teaching Scrum than there are people who are experts in teaching Kanban.
Or should we say people who think they're experts in teaching Scrum? Is that being a little bit too?
I think actually whether you add the think they are or not does not change how true that statement is, because I think there are more people who are experts in teaching Scrum than Kanban, and also there are more people who think they're experts in teaching Scrum than think they're experts in teaching Kanban as well.
So where do you think this myth comes from? That Kanban is only for very, very mature Agile teams? Why would anyone say that?
I think it's the same thing. I think because there are the business implication of saying that, hey, you should start with Scrum is that, hey, I can teach you Scrum. So because there is a greater incentive for folks to start with Scrum than Kanban. I think someone who knows both, it might be interesting to find out how they like to start with teams. But that's probably what perpetuates that same thing of, okay, I know how Scrum works. I can teach Scrum. I am confident in this. So I'll probably say let's start here rather than there.
Yeah. I think it comes down to something that we've said probably 1,000 times on this show. If you're in an environment where you haven't limited work in progress, and you want to transition to an environment where you are limiting a work in progress, that's a really, really, really hard thing to do. That's probably the hardest thing that you can do. What's ironic about that is if you implement Scrum, by definition, you should be limiting work in progress. There is no difference whether you're doing Kanban or you're doing Scrum. Both of those require you to limit work in progress. And I would go on, this is going to sound like I'm Scrum bashing. I'm really not trying to bash Scrum. But along with that comes a whole bunch of other stuff. there's a whole set of accountabilities that you now have to implement. If you don't have the concept of a team, you now have to put that in place with Scrum. If you're not used to doing, incremental and iterative delivery, that's something that has to be done, with Scrum. So, all those things come along with the fact that, yes, and by the way, we're limiting work in progress. So I don't know, the argument doesn't make much sense to me.
I would also add something that another thing we've said over and over again. It's almost never Scrum or Kanban. It's you can easily, at any point of time, layer Kanban onto your Scrum practice, whether it's right at the beginning, whether it's a week into it, whether it's a month into it. You can at any point of time start layering Kanban in. Which is being a little talkative today.
I was gonna say, I think she agrees with that.
Yeah.
I mean, for sure. There's no doubt about the idea of there's almost certainly a benefit to mixing the two. Again, something we've said many times on the show. I don't know how you do Scrum without flow principles. I don't know how you do it. If you're trying to get the most out of Scrum, at least the teams that I would assume are getting the most out of the Scrum, are implementing some parts of flow, as well as the teams who are implementing flow probably do a lot of the practices of a Scrum. We talk a lot about, of course, we can debate daily Scrum versus daily stand-up, but they're doing some type of daily meeting probably. They're doing retrospectives, they're doing reviews with customers. They're probably doing some type of planning, setting some type of goals. They're probably doing all of those things. So, I don't know what are some other reasons why.
Yeah, and in order to get into the other reasons, I actually want to refocus us on the comment that we received, and I kind of pulled it up as we were talking here. This is from Anya Maywald. I'm hoping that I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm going to read the last part of it, which is, I keep hearing and reading all the time on PowerPoints, workshops, and trainings that Kanban is only for agile mature teams. Would you be able to help me find argument to disprove this? Or perhaps, if the statement is true, explain why. So I'm glad that Anya has an open mind on, hey, maybe it is true, but if it's not, what do we say? So the reason, and Dan, you already kind of mentioned this, the reason I believe Kanban is actually easier to implement is because it's simpler than Scrum. I think it's talking about incremental steps and incremental delivery. It's a smaller increment than Scrum is. We've talked about definition of Kanban and things that and we're going to point you to the Pro Kanban small batch Kanban channel to kind of take a look at the Kanban guide videos. It's actually pretty easy to start. It's a little, actually I've said pretty easy, pretty simple to start. It's not that easy because, as we mentioned earlier, limiting WIP is not an easy thing to do. But you'll have to do it anyway if you're doing Scrum. So it is a simpler place to start.
And I'm wondering, you I hate to say it, you bring up a good point, because I wonder, when I talk about Scrum, I always talk about it from the perspective of professional Scrum, which means, we've read the Scrum guide, we believe the Scrum guide, and we want to implement the stuff that's in the Scrum guide. My guess is probably 80 to 90, maybe more % of Scrum implementations out there probably ignore major sections of the Scrum guide. And so if you're going to do that, if you're only going to kind of pick and choose what you like about Scrum, and you're only going to pick and choose what you like about Kanban, maybe on the surface, it might look like Kanban is harder because we emphasize so much, the visualization of work, the limiting of work in progress, the metrics, and things like that. On the surface, it might look like it's harder because you're potentially throwing out, all the difficult bits of Scrum. So, I mean, maybe that's kind of I think kind of a key point to bring up is, well, I think I'm speaking for you here too, but when we talk about Scrum, we're talking about professional Scrum and how professional Scrum is implemented. We're not talking about what, some people might call zombie Scrum, or some of these other more derogatory terms that I don't necessarily want to say, on the air, which is kind of strange. Maybe I should say them, but I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, and the picking and choosing. Let's say if you were doing the picking and choosing from the Scrum Guide, here is what I would suggest you pick and choose. You pick and choose things like having a definition of done, and having a way to know that the team has started work. I would choose limiting the amount of work the team takes on, and I would choose inspecting and adapting and making that process better. Guess what? You do those three things, you're doing Kanban. So in a way, Kanban is actually a subset of Scrum practices. And a subset is usually easier to start with than a large set.
So, yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. We've talked about this. The Scrum Guide reads like to me anyway, because I have flow glasses on, right? I have a flow lens on. The Scrum Guide reads like a flow document to me. But I think the Scrum community, and probably rightly so, would argue in that case where we're picking and choosing, well, that's not Scrum anymore. And I think that's a fair argument, to say, that there is a legitimate definition of Scrum out there, and you can't just choose, what you like about the definition and what you don't like about the definition. Kind of the same thing with Kanban. So yeah, I think there is a way to make a Scrum implementation easier to implement than Kanban, but at that point, it's not Scrum. So getting back to what are some arguments against Kanban is only for mature teams. Yeah. To me, like I said, some of those arguments are if we're talking about professional Scrum, we're talking about all the elements of the Scrum Guide. Not picking and choosing. Whereas, as you just pointed out, Kanban's a bit of a subset of that. Plus, I think we've talked on previous episodes about, even if you don't go full Kanban, right? The easiest place to start to take you down that flow path is just something as simple as looking at aging. Now even that's kind of deceptively simple because there's some things you need in place for that. But what are some other arguments against the whole Kanban's only for mature teams?
Well, I also, as I hear that over and over again, I read that over and over again, I'm like, what do you mean by a mature team? Like it's okay, fine. So at what point does Kanban, and how do you measure that the team is mature? If you take the very, very base definition of agility, which is a team that gets fast feedback and adjusts based on it, to me, and again, these are my flow glasses, to me, figuring out whether a team is getting fast feedback and adjusting things is, what's their cycle time? How long does it take for something to start from start to finish? And if that's how we're judging a team's maturity, you don't need to be super mature. You might, in fact, most teams that start with Kanban probably have cycle times that would embarrass them. And that's probably the reason they start with Kanban.
Yeah, and I think we finally got to the heart of the matter, the crux of the argument here. And I'm going to say this, and I hate to say it because it's a classic consultant speak, idiom, cliche, whatever you want to call it. But asking the statement Kanban's only for mature teams. I mean, that to me, that's just kind of the wrong sentiment. I mean, what who cares, right? Is that what are we really looking for here? I mean, why are you looking at Kanban versus why are you looking at Scrum? Is there something about your context that wouldn't allow you to choose one or the other? it's not necessarily that one is better. It's not necessarily that one is for mature and one is for, complex
Novice,
contexts
yeah.
versus simple contexts, or whatever. It's like what's going to fit your context, what's going to fit your culture, what's going to fit all of those things. And as we've just said, I think a million times by now, it's probably going to be a mix of both, and probably should be a mix of both.
Mm-hmm. I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. Last word. I don't know. Yeah, unless you have anything else to say. Do you have a?
Yeah, I mean that's. I was kind of getting towards last word as well. So it's at the end of the day, it what helps your team progress towards whatever you believe agile is, or whatever you believe maturity is. Frankly, shouldn't even worry about what agile is. What you're after most likely is how can I deliver value to customers more frequently and adjust, or whatever gets you there. And our belief is that whether it's Scrum or Kanban, either can get you there. You just have to figure out what works best in your context.
Note to self, by the way, because you just made me think, because you touched on it earlier. Our definition of agility, I don't know if have we covered that?
I don't think we have.
We've, like I said, we've kind of talked around it in several episodes.
Wait,
so
isn't this drunk agile? Isn't part of the name?
Yeah, go figure. We probably, well, then we have to define drunk too. We'll probably have to do that. Yeah.
How many avocados?
Yeah, exactly. So with that, again, thank you, Anya, for the comments. All of you out there, the invitation is open for you to leave us comments. We do listen to you, and we'd love to talk about what you want to hear. So, in the meantime, remember, stop stopping when it comes to the drunk part of drunk agile. Thank you so much for listening. For Nisha, who has disappeared, there she is. She's like, get me out of here now. So for Nisha, the star of the show, for Prateek Singh, my name is Daniel Vacanti. We will see you in the next episode. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.